Hello, ECE 140 class. Welcome to week 5. At least Jessica and I think it's week 5, pretty sure. Today we are going to get into development. We're going to start today really talking about children's development. We're going to be breaking them into age groups. Today will be 0 to 6 months. Next week will be 6 to 12 months, and then we'll go to 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, all the way through. But before we do that, just some business really quick. If you're listening to this recording, then I'm assuming, Jessica and I are assuming that you are fully involved in the class. So be sure that you finish discussion 2. There's quite a few students who haven't either interacted with another teammate or haven't done the answered the discussion questions at all. We'll have until Wednesday of this week, which is May 13th, to answer the discussion questions, and then you will have until Sunday, May 17th, to interact with your teammates using the guidelines that are on the assignment page. If no one from your team answers the questions and you don't have anyone in your group to comment to, don't worry, you will get full credit. But if you do have someone on your team who has answered the questions, part of the assignment is for you to read them and make comments, ask questions. So hopefully that makes sense. We are going to go through and remove some of the students who haven't been active at all, so that should help. Again, if you find that you have no one in your group besides you, don't worry, you will get full credit, okay? Also let you know that we are going to be using this textbook pretty much. My lectures for the rest of the class, for the most part, will come from that textbook. If you don't have that textbook, I encourage you to get it. But if you can't, there is development information in the Working with Young Children textbook, and also my lectures and PowerPoints. All right, so let's get started. Jessica, anything else? Okay, let me share the screen. Slideshow from the beginning. Ooh, we don't need all that. Let me turn the noise off of that. Sorry about that, you guys. Okay. All right. So this is development birth to 6 months. If you remember in our first lectures, we went over the 3 areas of development: social, emotional, cognitive, and physical. Just want to remind you that that is the 3 areas of development we will go through for every age group, okay? So let's start first with the social emotional development for 0 to 6 months. What we typically would see 0 to 6 months for their social emotional development. If you don't remember what social emotional development is, I encourage you to stop this recording, go back to the lecture, the PowerPoint, the recording, and refresh yourself. All right, because it will be important for you to understand that we are talking about the social emotional development and what that means. All right, so let's talk about what's important for children, or what their 0 to 6 months and what their social emotional development looks like. The first connections a baby makes is with the people in their life, okay? All human emotional development is rooted in infancy, okay? It's rooted in how a child bonds and develops an attachment. And the definition for that, for bonding and attachment, two different words, but they're pretty much the same thing. The definition for bonding and attachment is a tie to a special person, or an instinctive, strong attachment of human babies to their mothers or mothering ones or caregivers. Okay, so that is the definition of bonding and or attachment. Okay, I cannot understate how crucial it is for infants to develop a bond with an adult. Okay, to have that tie, that connection, that attachment to a special person. Now that doesn't have to be the biological mom, but there needs to be someone, a mothering one, because it is the first relationship and the starting point for all other relationships they'll have in their life. So like I said, I cannot understate or overstate, I cannot overstate how crucial it is for an infant to develop a bond and attachment. It is connected to all other healthy development in their future. And it is, like I said, the starting point in every relationship they'll have. If anybody's ever done therapy, one of the first questions they ask is, what is your relationship like with your mother, right? What did your childhood look like, right? What did those starting relationships look like, okay? So if I was to ask who is a child's primary bond, most people would say their mother, and that is true, but it's also anyone who provides that mothering role, okay? So it could be the adoptive parents, it could be a grandmother or abuelita, it could be, you know, a father, but it is that mothering one, that's their primary bond. And there is a secondary bond, oftentimes. And the textbook says that's us. That's us who are child care providers, okay? A child care providers can provide a secondary bond, okay? Because we are often with them so much. For some infants, we can be with them as many hours as their mothering one or their parents or their guardians, okay? But don't get it twisted, you guys. We can't replace that primary bond. Okay, babies know, and we should encourage that they have that primary bond with the mothering one. Okay, we are the secondary bond. That bond and attachment is necessary for children, for infants, to develop that basic trust. That trust that we talked about with Erickson, right? Infants are either going to develop trust in their environment, in the world, or mistrust, okay? And that bond and attachment is what leads to trust. So how do the adults in their life develop that trust? Those basic needs that we talked about with Erickson must be met, okay? Children very early on, infants very early on, learn if they can trust or not trust their environment based on how their needs are met. When they cry, do they get relief? Right? When they're hungry, are they fed? Right? When they have a dirty diaper, are they cleansed? Okay? So that trust is met by their needs being met. okay? The book talks about a rhythm, kind of a dance needs to be developed between the caregiver and the baby, okay? This rhythm of distress and relief, right? When a baby cries, their needs are met, okay? They show distress, we offer relief. That rhythm, okay, this pattern, when this rhythm is repeated over and over and over again, and there's consistency, and not only that it's met consistently, but it's met positively, warmly, compassionately. When that distress relief rhythm is completed consistently, basic trust is developed in infants. Okay? So it's understanding that when a baby cries, they are communicating a need. It is the only way they know how to communicate. Every cry that a baby exhibits is them communicating a need. We want children to develop a basic trust in their environment. Our job is to meet that need warmly, consistently. It really is important that we understand that rhythm and how important it is to children developing, infants developing that basic trust. Okay. If children's cries are not answered, they develop mistrust. The idea, and we've heard this a lot, I'm sure many of you have heard that, if not all of you have heard, if you pick up a child, a baby, an infant, if you pick up an infant, every time they cry, they'll be spoiled. I just need you to know that that is not consistent with development. It's not consistent with brain development and the connections that infants are making. Remember, we talked about synapses, the connections that children are making, and I keep saying children, that infants are making in their brain. Those connections are either going to be negative and in their reptilian part of their brain because their cries aren't met, and so they are developing, or their brains are emitting cortisol, and so those connections are negative and they develop mistrust. Or we meet their needs, we respond to their cries, and the brain develops positively. Those connections are positive and they're here in the thought processes and not back here with the fight or flight. So again, I cannot overstate how important it is that we understand that every cry that an infant exhibits, that an infant is giving, is their way of communicating a need. Our job for optimum development is to respond to that need, okay? Is to meet that need. Another thing that's really important about meeting children's needs in order for them to develop basic trust is allowing the child's inner schedule to dictate, not change their schedule to meet our needs. Now I know that that's a tough one, okay? I totally get children are up at all hours. Sometimes we have to work. I get all of that. But my job is to provide you the information in regards to optimum development, brain development, what's ultimately best for the baby. And that is allowing the child's instinctive schedule, their schedule to dictate their beginning life. Okay, that we respond to their needs, not try to change them to meet our needs. And the reason for that is, if anybody's ever tried to do that, and I did have, one of my daughters did the kind of cry it out method, that sleep training. And in order to change a child's inner schedule, there's always going to be times where the child's needs are not being met, right? If you think, not you in particular, but if the adult feels like they're eating too often and so they decide, well, they need to wait 3 hours. That inner schedule, we're talking about an infant, 0 to 6 months, okay? If we don't respond to the cry because we want them to wait to eat, if we don't respond to the cry because we have decided that they need to learn how to sleep longer, or we need them to fall asleep sooner, and we don't respond to those cries, okay, brain connections are being made in that time, okay? That's just science, okay? That's not theory, that's just science. Brain connections are being made in those times where their distress is not being relieved, and their needs are not being met. And that absolutely can affect their trust, okay? Trust is incredibly important. If children don't trust their environments, don't trust the adults, then they don't develop security, okay? Trust grows into security. And that security, feeling secure, safe, affects their ability to go out and explore. And if you think about what happens right around 6 months physically, which we'll talk about in a minute, if children don't have that bond and attachment, which is developed, which allows for trust to develop, which then grows into security, it affects all of their development, okay? So this is the progression of development, their social emotional development, 0 to 6 months, okay? Also want you to understand that this development, this need for developing a bond and attachment and developing that basic trust, that is ongoing. It doesn't just stop at 6 months. It is ongoing, okay? But this progression of developing a bond and attachment, which develops into trust, which then grows into security, is the progression that we need our infants to start developing for optimum development. All right? Okay, that is social emotional development, bonding, and trust. Okay? Other things that are important in regards to our infants' social and emotional development, specifically social development, relationships with other people. Have you thought about how soon an infant shows interest in people? How soon does an infant begin a relationship with another person? Immediately. Immediately. As soon as that eye contact is made, as soon as that skin to skin, okay? We are created relational people. So that starts immediately. Okay. Feeding, while obviously is a physical need, It is also a social need, okay? When we feed infants, we are developing a bond with them through nursing, bottle feeding, even spoon feeding. But 0 to 6 months, clearly it's mostly, if not all, nursing or bottle feeding, okay? That feeding time, that meeting of a basic need, is also very much a social time. It's when we are bonding with them, nurturing them, right? Smiling is a milestone that infants will develop, right? That social smile right around 6 weeks old. And it is the best, right? It doesn't matter what kind of day you're having. That you see my grandson right there. As soon as you see that gummy smile from an infant, like, you can't help but smile back, right? Okay. But it is proof that we are created relational beings, okay? That social smile is something that they develop, okay? And then a little bit later, that laugh and excitement to draw in people, okay? To draw in people, okay? Right around 3 months is when they start to develop that belly laugh and excitement, okay? Remember that smiling is an important, critical step in that bonding process. So when they do that, they're needing us to respond to them, okay, as part of their that bonding process. It happens early, 6 weeks, because it is crucial that infants develop a bond that early. So they exhibit this social smile to draw people in, okay? The other developmental issue in regards to social development is vision, right? At birth, infants can see a certain amount of inches. If anybody knows who that is, raise your hand. Just kidding. Babies can see and stare intently 8 to 12 inches away. It's blurry at first, but they can see 8 to 12 inches away. That is not an accident in regards to social development. Because if you think about when a mother is nursing, or when we are bottle feeding, how many inches are their eyes to our eyes, right? Right around 8 inches, okay? Their visual development affects their social development, okay? Seeing that feeding as an opportunity to develop a bond is really, really important. Very early on in their infancy, they will start to turn towards voices. They are attracted to bright colors and sharp contrasts and patterns. So the black, white, quilts that have sharp contrast in patterns. They're very interested in things that move. At 6 weeks old, they will start to follow objects with their eyes. Okay. It doesn't take very long for their visual development to become pretty sharp. Okay. That is social development. Let's move on now to physical development. Okay. If you remember, there are 2 types of physical development. Okay. Fine motor and gross motor. Okay. Before we talk about those, it's important that we understand that infants are born with reflexes, okay? The definition for a reflex: an automatic body response. Okay, an automatic body response. Okay, and it is the only physical ability that children have at birth. They don't have any fine motor skills. They don't have any gross motor skills. Okay, their fine motor development and gross motor development is not strong enough to have fine motor skills or gross motor skills. The only physical ability that infants have at birth are reflexes, those automatic body responses. Okay, if anybody's ever had a baby or knows anything about childbirth, once a baby is born and the doctor or the nurses check them, they often do an APGAR score. And one of the things that they score are their reflexes. Okay, they check babies' reflexes at birth so that they know that the brain is telling their body what to do. Okay, they are checking that the connection between the central nervous system and the brain is working. Because that's what a reflex is our brain sending information through the central nervous system to tell our body what to do automatically. Okay, so doctors and nurses check reflexes at birth to make sure that the central nervous system is doing what it's supposed to be doing. There are two types of reflexes: survival and primitive. Okay, the first one that we talk about is survival. These are reflexes that we are born with that we need to survive, like sucking, right? Rooting, which is if you see this in the picture right here, top left, sorry, those pictures are not great. If you touch a baby's cheek, what do? An infant, if you touch them, they go for it. They look for food. That's called rooting. That is a reflex, okay? That usually disappears around 3 or 4 months, okay? Swallowing is another reflex, okay? That's needed for survival, that babies that we are born with. There's also primitive reflexes, okay? Primitive reflexes, they help development. They help our physical development, our baby's physical development, but they all eventually go away. Okay? They can be kind of understood as the foundation for development later, for motor development, cognitive development. Okay? They're kind of foundational to help development later. Okay? Babinski, which lasts about the first year, is when you stroke the bottom of their feet. You see this at the bottom left. You stroke the bottom of their feet, their toes separate like this. Okay? That is the Babinski reflex. Okay? The other is the Moro reflex. That's this middle square right here. Okay? It peaks right around the first month. And what happens with that is if you're holding a baby and there's a loud noise, or if they think they're going to be dropped, their hands and arms do this. Okay? It's called the startle reflex or the Moro reflex. Okay? And that's an automatic reflex. Palmar is the grasp reflex. Okay? If any of you have ever had an infant grab your hair and it's death grip, okay? That is an automatic reflex. I promise you, no infant is pulling your hair to hurt you, okay? They don't have the ability yet to know that they're hurting you, okay? That is a reflex. If anything touches their hand, they death grip it, okay? Automatically, okay? That weakens right around 3 or 4 months, disappears completely around the first year, okay? Anything that touches their hand, they will death grip it. They will grab it and hold on to it. And man, in infancy, those first few months, like you really have to move their hands, yes? Because that is a grip, okay? Again, it weakens right around 3 or 4 months. But important for us to remember, that is an important reflex, okay? That is a foundation for their fine motor skills later. It is a sign, a positive sign that their brain and central nervous system is working, okay? Stepping is another reflex. That is this bottom right one here. If you hold a baby up by their armpits, their legs will automatically start to step, okay? It doesn't mean they're ready to walk. This is a reflex, okay? This is a reflex. And that usually lasts until 2 or 3 months, okay? And then the last one that you see here, which is the middle box on the right, that is what's called the tonic reflex, okay? Which every typically developing baby does. I think that we don't notice it. I didn't even notice it or even know what it was until I actually started teaching this class. But once I read about it, then I see it with every baby that I've ever been with, okay? And what that is when you lay a baby flat, their arms do this. It's also called the fencing reflex, okay? One arm is bent like this and the other arm straight out, and that's how they lay, okay? That is called the tonic reflex. That's usually gone by 3 months, okay? And what they have seen though is if it doesn't disappear around 6 months, it can be a signifier of developmental delays. So it is typical to see that when you lay a baby down, okay? That's called a tonic reflex, okay? So those are reflexes. Those are the only physical ability children have at birth, okay? Let's move on now to gross motor development, okay? All these, oopsie, sorry. Pretty much all these pictures you see are my grandkids. So those babies that you see is Caden, my oldest grandson, and then the picture on the top right, that's Caden now at 7 with my newest grandson, Malachi. So this is what you see in regards to the gross motor developmental progression, okay? So again, if you don't remember gross motor development, the definition, go back and read it. Go back and listen to the lecture, okay? It's important for us to remember that physical development, well, all development happens in a progression, okay? One thing needs to happen before the next thing needs to happen. But the timing is different for every child. So what I'm talking about today is the typical gross motor or large muscle development, 0 to 6 months, okay? The first thing that we see for their gross motor development is the skill of being able to control their head, okay? What you see at infancy is a complete inability. They, do this. They cannot hold their head up. That is the first non-reflexive physical ability that they develop, is head control and mobility. That typically happens right around 6 to 8 weeks, where they're able to hold their head up when you hold them, and then start to move from side to side, okay? Right around 3 to 4 months, they start to develop more head and torso control, okay? They can lift their head up, raise their chest, which you see in the bottom right-hand picture, okay? Raise up their head and chest on their own, supported by their arms. That is 3 to 4 months. Please remember, none of these skills, these gross motor skills, need to be taught. Okay? You don't need to help a child learn how to develop head and torso control. It happens naturally. If they're put on the floor, okay, you hold them, these things happen naturally, okay? Right after head and torso control, they start to learn how to roll over, okay? They start to learn how to roll over. We should be putting infants on their back, not on their stomach, okay? Children should not start off being put on their stomach. That is an unnatural position, and they have very little mobility when you put them on their stomach, okay? Their torso and head is where their strengths are coming from. Do you remember cephalocaudal and proximal distal development? Okay, the core out and head down. So they need to be put on their back. They can't move their arms and legs freely if you put them on their stomach, okay? Tummy time starts on the back, okay? It becomes tummy time when they can roll on their own, okay? And very often we're given misinformation that children should be given tummy times very early on, and it's too early. Unless they can get on the back, roll over on their stomach on their own, they should only be put on their back. Again, because they don't have movement. If you lay right now on your stomach, you'll see how hard it is to move your arms freely, move your legs freely, and move your head freely. That's why when you put a baby on their stomach and they can't get on their back, they cry. It's a horrible feeling because they can't move, okay? So we need to put them on their back so they can move around, twist, stretch, roll. And what you'll see right around 6 months old, 4 to 6 months old, is them rolling over, okay? It's really important that our infants are not confined in things that restrict movement for long periods of time. It affects this progression of development, okay? Infant seats, bouncers, sitting rings, boppies, okay? Too much time in these contraptions that confine their movement absolutely affects this natural progression of development that infants are created to develop. Okay? They just need to be given the freedom to move their body, okay? Opportunities to develop their muscles, okay? All right, so that is the gross motor progression of development, 0 to 6 months. Fine development. So we talked already about that palmar grasp. That fist, right? When you touch them, that grasping that palmar, that is the beginning of their fine motor development. Okay, that palmar grasp. Okay. You'll see them discover their hands right around 6 weeks. Okay. They'll start to open their hand more right around 6 weeks. Okay. Right around 2 to 3 months, you'll start to see the batting. Okay. This is when they're swiping or batting at things, trying to learn about them, trying to get them. Okay. I have heard parents or adults scold an infant because they feel like they're getting hit by them. It is important for us to understand, okay? Infants don't have the ability to do anything intentional yet, okay? They definitely don't have the emotional ability to know that what they do hurts someone, okay? So right around 2-3 months, it is developmentally appropriate for them to be batting at things, your hair, your sunglasses, anything in their vicinity, they're going to try to get. And because their fine motor and gross motor is so minimal, that development, okay, they're going to be batting at it, trying to get it. Full arm movement, okay, trying to get at it, okay. Right around 4 months, as they're batting, they're going to start grabbing, okay. Right around 4 months. So your hair, your sunglasses, anything that they can get their hands on, okay, batting and grasping. And then almost always when they do, immediately it goes to their mouth, okay? Because remember, Piaget talked about this is the sensory motor stage, okay? They're learning everything from using their senses and their motor abilities. So batting, grabbing when they touch, and putting it into their mouth is how they're learning, okay? If you don't want a baby to put something in their mouth, don't put it around them, okay? They're going to put it in their mouth, okay? And then right around 6 months, you see the picture down there at the bottom, is when they discover their feet, okay? And yes, even those they're going to put in their mouth. I actually have video of my grandson sucking on his toes like it was his thumb. Going to town, okay? So that is the fine motor development, okay? The progression for 0 to 6 months, right? All right, let's now go into cognitive development, okay? This is the process of thinking, okay? Progression of their thinking, okay? Like I just said in regards to Piaget, okay? Infants are using their senses to form mental images. The information that they receive is through their eyes, their ears, their mouth, their touch, their hearing, okay? To try to form mental images, okay? Now, 0 to 6 months, infants have a lack of what's called object permanence. Yeah. I'm not going to show the video, but I do encourage you to watch it, and it will be necessary when we do next week when we assign the observation. Okay, you will want to really understand object permanence. Okay, in 0 to 6 months, children or infants cannot remember, they cannot keep a mental image of anything that they see. So essentially they don't have memory, okay, in regards to visual images, okay. So babies between 0 to 6 months old cannot keep a mental image of an object that they can't see anymore. So playing peekaboo with a 0 to 6 month old is not really effective, okay, because they can't retain mental images of objects that they see, okay? They don't have that kind of memory yet. That's called object permanence. That doesn't happen until later, okay? Another thing that we will see in infants 0 to 6 months is what's called object hunger, okay? Not a literal physical hunger, but a cognitive hunger, okay? To learn about everything that they can get their hands on, okay? They're hungry for learning about the properties of whatever they have, okay? So that death grip, that putting things in their mouth, that when they put it in their mouth, they're just like, ah, right? It is a hunger for learning about all the properties they can about objects, okay? It's very typical 0 to 6 months, that object hunger, okay? It's that drive to pick up and examine everything, okay? And it's almost always the first thing is for them to put in their mouth. But it can also be them banging things over and over again, throwing things over and over again, dropping them over and over again, okay? They're trying to gain information on the physical properties of any object, okay? It's a good thing. It's them learning, okay? Another thing that you start to see very early, at the minimal level, is the beginning of cause and effect, of them learning that they can make something happen, okay? Again, it's very minimal. Like when they cry, someone will respond. That's the beginning of them learning about cause and effect, okay? That when they do something, something will happen, okay? You could see that maybe when they kick something in their crib and their mobile moves. And so they keep kicking it and they're watching the mobile, right? They do it over and over and over again, okay? Those are the beginning understandings of cause and effect, okay? The other area of cognitive development that we will talk about through every age group is language, okay? Language is one of the most important parts of cognitive development, okay? For infants, their language is crying, okay? I think we talked about that quite a bit, okay? Their language is crying, okay? We also see mouth positions starting to happen, okay? Right around 4 to 6 months old, you'll start to see them be intentional about their mouth positions, okay? You'll start to see and hear them cooing, okay? Cooing is those gurgles and using saliva to make noises, to make vowel-like sounds, right? The oh, ah, oh, a horrible impression, but okay, that's the cooing. That's their first kind of intentional mouth sounds with their using mouth positions, okay? I think the book talks about dual languages and how it is really valuable if you want your child to be a dual language learner or to have dual languages, to start at infancy, fully immersing the baby in the languages that you want them to learn, okay? So if you have a dual language house, it is incredibly important to start from the beginning, that they fully hear whatever languages that you want them to be efficient at, okay? It starts at the beginning. Infant brains are capable of receiving that, okay? And processing that at an early age, okay? The earlier, the better in regards to languages, okay? It is harder for our brains the older we get. And if anybody's ever tried to learn a second language as an adult, you know, okay? So that is cognitive development for the 0 to 6 months old. The last thing that we talk about for every age group is how they play. What does play look like for every age group? And this is incredibly important because this is how children develop and learn, is through play, okay? Okay. So we talked at the beginning about the social emotional development, and that attachment and bonding leads to trust, which grows into security, okay? And then once they're secure, they will go out and explore their world, okay? The way an infant 0 to 6 months explores their world, okay, or when they explore their world, that is their play, okay? That object hunger, that is their play, okay? Our role is to provide a clean and safe environment, okay? Get on the floor at their level, okay? Observe it and make sure that it's safe so that they can move their body around, okay? Provide them with objects to look at and manipulate, okay? Please, you don't need to go to anywhere and buy anything. What we have in our homes is enough, okay? A bandana or cotton piece of fabric is enough, okay? A picture of you, your face is enough, okay? What you have in your house, if they are given the opportunity to move freely, it's enough, okay? Talk with them. Make a lot of eye contact with them. Use caregiving routines like diaper changing, feeding, bathing, dressing as opportunities to develop that bond and attachment, okay? And lastly, take them outside, okay? If we know that children, that our babies are learning through their senses, where is the most sensory environment you can have? Outside. When we take our grandson outside, he just turned 7 months old. But from the beginning, when we took him outside, immediately looking around, taking it all in, okay? It has been said, if you have a child who is having a hard time, who is fussy, water and outside. Put him in water, take him outside. That almost always works, right? Because their sensory needs are being met, okay? Take them outside, okay? Doesn't matter what the weather is, you guys. If anybody's ever grown up where it snows, babies go outside and they are okay, okay? We don't get sick from being outside in the cold, okay? Babies aren't gonna get sick from being outside in the cold, okay? I know that might freak some of you out, okay? We only get sick by viruses, which right now is clear, right? They're actually saying the sun is helpful to kill the virus, right? Okay. Keeping babies inside in close proximity to each other where they breathe on each other, that's how they get sick. Not from being outside, not from being cold, okay? Of course, bundle them up, but being outside is important, okay? Vitamin D, developing their immune systems, a rich sensory environment, on a blanket so they can move their body, okay? Take them outside. All right, I think that is it for 0 to 6 months, okay? So I'm going to stop the recording. You guys have a great day. Again, if you want further conversation about this, if you have any questions, please email, let us know. We'll do a Zoom live. Our goal is very much, even in this unconventional way for us, our goal is for you to really understand this important information, okay? We take it very seriously. It's not how we would choose to provide the information, but it is what we have to do. So I hope and encourage you, if you have any questions or want further conversation about this, any of it, email us and we can do a Zoom live. All right? Have a great day.